Hello guys, and welcome to another video by Dark Rays from Zeus&Poseidon. This video is about jungle Fizz. It's a guide actually. So first let's take a look at what items you should build. Okay, so this is a full build. As you can see, I choose to go with Spectral Wraith, Sorcerer's Shoes, Lichbane, Zhonya's Hourglass, Rabadon's Deathcap, and Void Staff. Yes, that's what it's called. The reason that I chose Spectral Wraith is pretty simple. It's the only AP jungle item. You could probably buy a Fist. What's it called? Ancient Golem. Yeah, that's the name. But I don't think it's viable considering the fact that you still play Fizz in the jungle as an assassin rather than a bruiser. So that means obviously start machetes in 5 pots like you normally would with jungle, and then try to build it as fast as possible. Obviously, if you don't have enough money to buy Spectral Wraith and you maybe have 500 gold extra, just buy normal boots for a little bit of movement speed. That's perfectly fine. But you will want to get it rather early due to the fact that you won't be jungling a lot late game. You'll be doing most of your jungling early game, which means that you need to get those 30 stacks rather early. Anyway, finish that. You get Sorcerer's Shoes. Well, let's face it, there are a lot of other boots that you could choose. I mean, boots of ability, boots of speed, I guess also, cooldown reduction boots, all of that. But I might just go with Sorcerer's Shoes because it's very strong throughout the entire game, especially late game. That magic penetration becomes very helpful, considering the fact that I also chose to build Void Staff last, which means that is one of my only ways of getting magic penetration for the early game. After that, I build my Lichbane. Because, well, it gives it tons of damage with your W and your Q. Because WQ is an incredibly strong engage because it instantly procs your Lichbane. Your Q procs your Lichbane. And then it basically gives you another proc afterwards. Yes, that's why I built that. And then afterwards, I mean, now you could say, now you pretty much like have open store. You can go buy Abyssal Scepter and stuff like that if you want to. But I almost without exception go for the Zhonya's after this, because usually you want to be fed at this point, otherwise you're going to fail anyway. So if you are fed, which you should be at this point, then you'll want to get Zhonya's to avoid deaths in general, and also in team fights use the possibility of obviously using the Zhonya's and then getting back into fight and dealing some extra damage afterwards. After this, I just get my Rabadon's Deathcap for extra AP. You could, again, build something else first, or generally just build something else with Rabadon's if you don't like Rabadon's. But I choose to get it, and then finish off with Void Staff for the Magic Pen. Oh, sorry, Magic Pen, but Magic Resistance Ignore, I guess it is. Basically the same as Magic Pen. Anyway, sometimes I also get the Void Staff first if I feel like I don't really actually need more damage, or if the enemy is building like a crap load of magic resist, then it can also be very strong to do so. Now let's take a look at the masteries. For masteries, I choose to go 2190. The reason I do this is that, well, as said before, you still play him as an assassin, therefore you will want to have tons of damage. But I still think that survivability early game is very strong because, well, you're jungling. You wouldn't want to die in the jungle. And Fizz doesn't actually have any like proper defensive tools, so therefore having that little bit of defensiveness is very important. I also take all of the minion things basically, or whatever you want to call them. And the only thing that maybe isn't self-explanatory is the fact I take attack speed instead of cooldown reduction, because you could probably choose to take cooldown reduction instead. The reason I do this is that early game, the primary part of your damage in the jungle is your W. And since that basically procs every time you hit a basic attack, I think the basic attack is very strong early game. And it's almost necessary to be able to have a decent clear time. It does really help about 5%. Now moving on to the runes. As you can see, these are the runes I'm running. I'm running 26 ability power, 9 armor, and 7.8 magic penetration. For quintessences, I have ability power. For glyphs, I have ability power. For seals, I have armor. And for marks, I have magic penetration. Note that all of these stats are flat. None of them are scaling. The reason that I'm running the ability power, the flat ability power, is that you won't actually get any ability power items until you get 1,700 gold and get your juggle item. And therefore, that means the ganks you will be doing until about your second back will all be based off of your base AP from your masteries and your runes. Therefore, I think it's very important to have some ability power, and I think running flat is definitely easier because you get a lot more AP early game. You'll have lots of AP late game anyway. The reason I'm also running flat armor is because otherwise you die in the jungle. I mean, that's as simple as it is. Fizz is very squishy. He dies in the jungle if he doesn't have armor in a space. And the magic penetration, now is probably the only point I'd say you might be able to find something that is equally good. I don't know what that would be, but that's not the point. You could probably go get something else, because 7.8 magic pen, well, it does help you, definitely, no doubt about that. But, well, it's not that important. The reason that magic penetration is strong early game at all is because you won't have any other except your sorcerer's shoes throughout the entire game. If you play get scaling magic pen, that might actually be a good replacement, but I like to run it flat. Generally, I just like to run flat runes, so that's as simple as it is. Yeah. Moving on to the skills, this is how I recommend that you choose the skills under normal jungling. Starting with your W, then your Q, and then your E. The reason for this is that your W is a large amount of your damage in the beginning, and it increases the takedown of a blue buff, which is where you will be starting almost always. And therefore that is definitely the best. Which means that you will get your Q immediately, after which you will usually take down the white, since that's a single target. Then your Q and your W will deal a lot of damage and take that down quickly. After that, you will finish off with your E, which can also be used for jungling, but in the jungle you will primarily use it for extra movement, because you can jump over walls with it, which increases your jungle time. And order of choosing skills when you're if you are invading the enemy, then you should probably take your Q first, because it gives the possibility of following up quickly on a CC that one of your other team members might be providing, or you can simply engage yourself if the enemy sees you and you feel like damage. Then get your W and your E. And the order of maxing skills should be Q, W, E, because this is the way that you will get the maximum damage potential. If you max your Q first, that will definitely give you more damage than if you max your W first, and your E does not give a lot of damage. The reason you want to max Q first, obviously the W would technically give more persistent damage, but the Q is definitely used, since you're an assassin, for assassinating enemies. And a lot of your damage, instant damage, comes from your Q, and you won't be in long consistent fights. Therefore your W is primarily used to just get the dot up. And also because it procs on your Q. The E, well, you could use it in fights, but I'll be more on that later. This is a way that I use my different spells in different situations. I put up 3 common scenarios. The ganking, obviously most common. Team fights probably the second place, and the 1v1ing is actually more of a rare situation, but I wanted to include it nonetheless because, well, why not? So first, ganking. I think that you should use your E in. People say that you shouldn't. Delete. But I would still keep doing it, because there is often a gap between your, well, bush and the lane. After this, if you're level 6 and don't have cooldown, I would use the ultimate, because it does give slow, and it's rather easy to hit. It does give you an easier opportunity, if you're still too far away, to get in and get that Q. After that, you just do W, Q, and to be honest, your opponent should be dead by now. If they're not, then you basically just keep using anything that doesn't have cooldown. For the 1v1ing, usually you will be rather close to your target when you begin. You wouldn't want to 1v1 ranged targets, I guess, unless you can get very close, obviously. What I would do is you W, Q, and then that means you're in melee range, then ult, because you're guaranteed to hit. Now you want to use your Zhonya's, if you have a Zhonya's, that is, because you want to reset the cooldown on your W and your Q. Your enemy will likely run away a little bit, depending on who you're playing against, obviously, which means that when you get out of the Zhonya's, you would want to use your E, so that you get within melee range again, and then you should possibly have your W, Q again. If you don't, well then just auto attack, I guess, and just use anything that's off cooldown again. In team fights, what I usually do is I do pop my ult as soon as some tank engages. After this, I do use my W, then my Q into diving often enemy marksmen or other squishy targets like casters, and then E out. The reason that you do this is because you want to have cooldown to reset. You want to act a lot like an assassin in team fights, where you jump in, deal a lot of damage, then jump out again to avoid enemies. So you just repeat this cycle afterwards. The last thing I want to mention before showing you some of my own gameplay was to mention that obviously, like many other general champions, you can't pick them in any team comp. And the same goes for Fizz jungle. The thing is with Fizz jungle, since he's an assassin jungling, you will require some tanks that can engage for you. You're basically missing a bruiser, which is often played in jungle, so therefore you will actually require a tank top, and I'm talking a real tank, something like Nasus or Mundo or Pantheon, something that builds mainly tanky items. In addition to that, your mid laner won't get a single blue throughout the entire game. That's as simple as it is. You'll want to get every single blue throughout the entire game because you don't really have any other proper mana regen, and when you're jungling, you're using all of your mana very quickly. You'll want an AD carry like normally, however the support should also be a tank. So something like Braum, Leona, possibly also Morgana, but not something like Soraka or Annie, or what else can we think of that wouldn't work? Kayle probably. Well, maybe Kayle actually. Maybe a bit Kayle tank support, I guess. But yeah, you know, Sona also. You don't want a caster as support either. You need somebody who can take damage and initiate team fights for you. Yeah, that's very important to note. So you should always check who the rest of your team is picking if you want to pick Fizz in ranked or draft pick. Obviously, also probably in blind pick. As you can see here, I am using Team Builder myself to record for some of the recordings I've made. I also do play Jungle Fizz in ranked, but I primarily played him in normal games, since it's rarely that you actually get this proper team comp in ranked. Whereas if you use Team Builder, you can actually make sure that you have the people you want in your team. Yeah, now then I will move on to show you some of my own gameplay. Now this is actually the only of my own gameplay I'm going to be commenting. As you can see, I am running down to gank mid, where Braum and Jax and Zed are taking down the tower. I just put a red circle on Braum there because he's very important to note. The reason that we actually don't get, or I don't get a triple kill is because Braum does a very, very well placed ultimate there, saving his teammates. Luckily Yasuo does go up and get the kill on Zed, but I managed to not really do anything. Now I won't be commenting on the rest of my own gameplay, so therefore just sit back and enjoy the show.
Rock.